right. Good morning, everyone, and happy fall day. The design of this is, as you see, is a panel. So my name is Joy Bride. I will move ahead. And we are here to talk about the Research Security Training Program. Yes, that is a new title. You have not heard it before. It is an upcoming federal requirement. It will take place a year from now. It will impact everyone on campus, which is why we're starting to discuss this now. Okay, so I'm here in my role. You may know me otherwise as the COI officer, but I'm also here wearing another hat, the Institutional Science and Security Officer, which means a coordinating position, but still obviously in the Division of Institutional Integrity and Risk Management. So I will let the panelists introduce themselves, and starting with to my left.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Collier. A lot of you might know me from my old OSR days, but I'm wearing a new hat now for the last 2.5 years. I am the Director of Research, Science, and Security out of the Office of Vice Chancellor for Research.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Creevy. I'm Associate Director for Global Travel. I'm in the Office of the Vice Provost for Global Affairs.
Good morning, folks. Nice to see you. My name is Mel Radcliffe. I'm an Information Security Manager within the Security Office here at the University.
Hi, I'm William Buha. I'm the interim export control officer here at Chapel Hill. I'm sitting in the export control office and currently moving, but formerly in the Institutional Integrity and Risk Management office.
Right. So as you can see, just from those 4 offices, what the scope of this is going to be. Okay, so some background. What is, we're calling it RSTP. We're going to have to use an acronym. We know this. This was actually first outlined in a White House memorandum called the National Security Presidential Memo under President Trump in January 2021. It was reconfirmed by President Biden coming out of the White House in January 2022. At that point, they basically said 4 bullets that are going to have to be combined with no details. They issued draft guidance earlier this spring. They got 55 comments nationally, a combination of the national organizations such as COGR, the Council of Government Relations, American Association of Universities, et cetera, as well as multiple universities and other institutions. It is required training for personnel, various categories, associated research awards, or contracts supported by federal funds. That's the very big scope. Yes. So the 4 areas that they have outlined, cybersecurity, foreign travel, export control, and then really the basis is the research security. And it's unfortunate that they repeated the name research security in the overall title, but that's the way it is. It can be related to research generally, but it also can be tied to a particular research grant. Yeah, we're in for some fun times here. Okay, so we're going to start off with having Brian Collier talk specifically about the research security training. I'll say we're going to morph. We thought this is the way the puzzle pieces were going to work together. We're going to do this so that research security is the biggest piece. Sorry, Brian, and then go from there. Okay. Yes.
So as George kind of alluded to, what we don't know at this point greatly is greater than what we do know at this point. So everything you're going to hear from the slides going forward is big picture issues as opposed to the nailed down nitty-gritty details. We will have time to get through the nitty-gritty details over the course of the year once the final guidance comes out, so there's no need to panic about that. But we just know a lot of the questions you may have that'll pop into your head right away, maybe ones we may not be able to answer at this time. So what we do know at this point is the research security program is going to have to be, there are specific topics that are going to have to be included in that program. We also know that we're going to have to provide training for new personnel at times of orientation. We haven't defined what orientation means yet. We know we're going to have to provide refresher training to all staff, most likely annually. Sometimes it may be only every 3 years. It's going to depend on the final guidance and who we have to ultimately train. And we know that we're going to have to regularly update training. That means as the government or the FBI or any other security agencies come out with new guidance, we're going to have to go back in and update our training so that it'll be the most current when we give it to the people again. Some of the more complicated pieces that we're gonna have to solve are that we're gonna have to track the training in a way that we know an individual has taken it before they submit a proposal for an award. That's ultimately gonna be driven by the sponsor, whether it's at the proposal or the award stage. But we're gonna have to figure out a way to track the individual PI or staff member has taken the training so that we can certify they went through it before we finalize an award. We're also gonna have to certify as an institution on an annual basis that our training program meets the new requirements. And I want to be clear that the training program is only one piece of the overall research security program that SPM 33 is going to hold us to. It'll also include things like disclosures, conflict of commitment, and other areas. We are going to have to, so in cases where we have a breach, and that breach could be that IPS has discovered that somebody has hacked into our data systems and potentially stolen unpublished research data, or it could be as simple as another disclosure support that was submitted where the faculty member accidentally left off one of his awards or a connection, a collaboration that he has. When we know about that, we're going to have to, within 5 days, notify the sponsor. And we're going to have to do specialized training with the individuals that are involved in that breach, so that they know what went wrong and what we're doing to fix it and what they have to do going forward to ensure it doesn't happen again. So the topics that I alluded to earlier, I won't go through this entire chart behind us, but as you can see, it covers a large number of topics that we're going to have to cover, some of which we know a lot about already, some of which we know little about at this point. It includes threat awareness, making sure that our faculty, when they're doing research and their postdocs and the lab members and even the research administrators, understand what a potential foreign threat could be regarding research. It's going to include insider threat training. What do we have to watch for among our peers? What kind of behaviors are we going to be looking for that could raise a concern that there's an insider threat risk? For example, if you saw somebody that wasn't a member of your lab coming in and taking pictures of your lab, that's a behavior that might trigger an insider threat because they don't have any reason to be in the lab. Why would they be taking photographs? Why would they be reading through your lab notes and coming through your lab experiments? What constitutes foreign interference overall? You read about that a lot in the press, and it's everything from political interference to research intellectual property theft. We're going to have to define foreign interference from a research perspective and include that in the training. Non-discrimination as a guiding principle has to be covered. One of the big things that the government got in trouble for is a charge of discrimination when they came out with the China Initiative, because a number of Asian Americans felt that they were being singled out unfairly. And so the government is trying to put a greater emphasis now on making sure that as we do this training and as we run this research security program, that we do it in a non-discriminatory way. And that is critical. And not only is it critical from a federal standpoint, but it's critical from a university values standpoint. It's one of the biggest things we stand for. And so we don't ever want anybody to feel like we're discriminating against them based on any factor whatsoever. It's going to include training on COI, a concept that everybody is familiar with at this point, and also a new concept that most folks are not familiar with called conflict of commitment. Thankfully, Joy's in charge of that piece because that piece is going to be a landmine waiting to explode. So I compare back to that earlier comment about the end of the microscope.
Yeah.
That one is going to have big implications across the board for everything we do from a research perspective. And it's probably going to be the one area where there is the most dissent across the various campus units and groups that are going to be involved in the process. Proper use of funds. What does that mean? I have absolutely no idea, but we have to train on it. So, I'm assuming they mean proper use of funds when it comes to accepting funding from foreign institutions or foreign awards, that sort of thing. But that's one of those areas that's going to have to be defined later. We're going to talk about training on international collaborations, the importance of it, which we all know already, I think, and the challenges involved with it. What do our faculty need to look out for when they're negotiating to do a collaboration with a colleague or a foreign institution? IP data practices goes without saying much more. Intellectual property theft has long been a target for the foreign influence field. And so that we'll definitely have a lot of training on that. We're gonna have to have export control training, which I don't have up here. So that's my mistake, but it's gonna be talked about further by William. And the final two areas that we're gonna have to include, that the research office will not be responsible for, but additional offices on UNC's campus will, are cybersecurity and international travel practices. So at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to, I believe, William's next.
No, Kim,
Yeah,
you're in
okay,
order.
Kim. We'll talk about her.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So foreign travel security, that is one of the 4 required components of the comprehensive research security plan that is being required of NSP 33 that we will be rolling out. And as Joy and Brian have said, we have time to roll this out, thankfully, because we do have still many questions as we are waiting for more guidance to come out. But we will be required to have an international travel policy that is for covered individuals, and covered, of course, has very specific definition. And that definition is still up for interpretation, so we can't really define that clearly today. But it would be for anyone who's engaged in federally funded R&D, who will be traveling internationally, whether that be for business or conference attendance or research. As well as policy is for anyone who has been offered like sponsored travel for research purposes. So it's a big wide umbrella that this international travel policy will have to cover. We currently have 3 travel policies on campus that we can point to, the state travel policy, the university travel policy, 1501 on business travel, as well as the UNC Central Office policy that's currently guidance that's currently in place still, which is why we still have the travel approval process for international travel. However, those don't necessarily address federal funds. And so that is something that we'll be looking at revising as we go forward and implementing all of these requirements. So the international travel policy is going to have to include 4 primary components, which you see here on the slide behind us. First one is that there's an organizational record of the travel currently that is Concur. And there are individuals who don't necessarily think that they need to go through Concur. And the answer is yes, you do. So please spread the word for us. We will, of course, be perhaps enhancing the particular database, whether we Concur or not. Currently, it is Concur. We will also have to have a disclosure and authorization process in advance of international travel. So again, you must have your travel pre-approved before you engage in the travel, and that is currently being managed in Concur through the travel request process, and that's coupled with the international travel approval process that's managed by Global Affairs. There also have to be mandatory security briefings, and those will be likely just in time when we know that you will be traveling, then we will provide the relevant training. But what that training will look like and what it is to cover, still, we do not yet know. And so we will, continue to, wait for more guidance and then roll that out as we know more. And then the final piece is the advice regarding electronic device security. And that currently is being handled by individual departments, by schools and colleges, and will likely continue to follow that model. But there are best practices that we can point to if we are asked to roll out something university-wide.
And in fact, those guidance will be set by cybersecurity.
There's more responsibilities. Thank you.
And move the mic over.
Yes.
In front of. there we go.
Hello. All right, so let me ask a question, and this won't be held against you. How many of you have taken a security awareness training course here at the university? Awesome. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and some of the 4 areas here that we want to look at. I think there's going to be some overlap between what we do in just the non-research world and the research world, because we do have things about insider threat in the training, but not to great detail. So we want to make sure that we've got that covered. 2 of the most targeted industries for attacks are healthcare and education. We're on the front lines. We've got people coming after us because we have the treasure, right? We've got health information, we've got social security numbers, we've got everything. And if they can get that, great for them. And making the challenge here is we've got a highly decentralized environment with a lot of units doing, they have their local IT, they follow some of their own procedures, et cetera. And then we've got central, which provides some of the tools. So trying to bring those together is going to be important. I think it's part of the effort here. So in terms of basic hygiene, we're talking basic things such as password management. And you probably had this drilled into you many times before. Don't share your password. Make sure you share your password, or make sure you change your password. You didn't hear that. Make sure you change your password frequently. We have a behind the scenes thing that when you change your onion password, it actually checks for any password that's been compromised in the past and throws out any that you tried it like that. So we have all those things in place. But to get to know your IT staff, your local IT staff, if you have not done that, because they can help you with things like getting your systems encrypted, making sure you've got antivirus software on there, and making sure that your Windows or Mac are updated as new patches come out. So social engineering, has anybody ever been phished before? Yeah, taking this, unfortunately. It's very common. One of the most common things, and the reason is it works. We've come a long way. Used to, your grandfather's scam was the Nigerian prince, right? Well, now they're very sophisticated, and as we get into artificial intelligence, I can't retard quickly enough because
No,
it's
no.
it's gonna be very difficult to tell now. We get things from our boss asking for certain things. It's very difficult being on the front lines like that. So we're going to have to work on how we do that so we don't lose things. And they're very, very smart. They work on your emotions. They work on the fact that you want to get some things done. So they, put something on here for you to be able to accomplish. And fortunately, it's in the wrong direction. Data protection. Here is, for research especially, it's things like, where is that data going to be stored? How is it going to be stored? Who's going to have access to it? Do we have the right security controls in place on some of these environments to meet the requirements that you're going to be held to? And little clue, there's a lot of requirements to be held to. DoD has their own, the state data has their own. They don't always match up with each other or with the official standards that are published, like NIST and ISO and all those kind of things. A lot of acronyms. I apologize. The one thing you don't want to hear when it comes to data is upload, because then you're going to be in trouble. Either OCR is going to come visit me, or Department of Defense will have somebody come visit as well.
Can you explain what OCR is?
Office of Civil Rights. So they are responsible for any PHI situations that occur, believe it or not. And one of the first things that they're going to ask is, show me who's been trained. And if you're a HIPAA covered entity, you're going to have more responsibilities than rewards. So all of this data comes with responsibilities and potentially money, funding to cover it. So in my office, we actually do risk assessments of solutions, and we help researchers or even non-researchers think through, we want a new product like Concur. We did a risk assessment on Concur. What security controls are in place? Is it a viable company? We feel comfortable that our data is going to be safe in the environment, in clouds, out somewhere out there. And we're very busy because there's a lot of stuff going on campus right now. And if we don't make the right decisions, there could be problems because we could end up with breaches. And I think Brian mentioned that briefly. You don't want to have unauthorized access to any of the data that you support. That's a bad thing. Some of the contracts that I've seen for the research area refer to breach notification in terms of 24 hours turnaround time. If you think something's been breached, you've got to get it back to the organization pretty quickly. Very difficult. One of the things that we need to do is to help people understand you know, what happens if I suspect a breach? What do I do? And the first thing is step away from the keyboard. Don't make things worse because evidence could be missed or lost. So we have procedures in non-research world. We need to make sure that we cover that in the research world as well. So kind of to the end of all of this is my office is going to be actually hiring 2 additional folks who focus strictly on security research because we think that's a real gap. I'm looking forward to that. A little overwhelmed. One of them has over 120 applications, so there are apparently people very interested in this topic. And I don't want to leave you on before I turn it over. I don't want to leave you with a sour note about all of the breaches and phishing and all that. But I will share that just this past week, I was offered an opportunity to earn $450 a week just for 2 hours a day for 2 to 3 times a week. And all I had to do was click the link and put in my credentials. So I'm thinking good things are going to happen soon. So with that,
So on my slide? All right, cool. Well, so I'm sure probably some of you have at least worked with me at some point. Hello, if I've met you before. So a large portion of what we're involved with research security and science and security in particular has to do with training. So if any of you attended the amazing, wonderful presentation that Lance and I did yesterday, and that is my own humble opinion of the presentation, you'll probably understand that a large portion of what we do with training revolves around what's known as fundamental research, as well as looking at the points for whenever you receive an award and when you're starting to set it up for, actual execution of the project. So we are in the process of creating modules for trainings for PIs, as well as providing more resources for research administrations, particularly folks in OSP, who, manage the award at time of award, and provide as many, materials as we can so that people understand when they need to loop us in and when they don't. So I think a big portion of that is that we focus a lot on what fundamental research means, how we need to kind of protect that at, time of award or, in prior to execution. And, we really want to streamline the process so that the PIs can really just focus on their work, as well as you as research administrators, you can focus on just setting up the project. A lot of what's involved with research, export controls in terms of research has to do with things like, controlled and classified information, security protocols for managing information that would be considered CUI, or any sort of export controlled technology, software. And we really want to develop trainings and informational materials that, explain what those are. We have a lot of that stuff already on our websites. We have existing online modules. We have our export at a glance training. We also have a visual compliance training, which if anyone here has access to visual compliance training, you should have taken. That was a large undertaking to kind of clean that up. And, we really want to make it so that people can focus on their jobs and don't have to worry about necessarily what export controls specifically are. And you only need to apply them in terms of, your actual scope of deployment. So we really want to make it so that it's easy for everyone to understand. I also wanted to just mention we are plugged into RCR. We are plugged into a few other processes like Ramses. Like I said, Lance in my training yesterday, which I believe was recorded, is a great it showcases kind of where we're plugged in and the toggles that are set up in places like Ramses, so that that streamlines the process to us whenever you need to loop us in. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to cover, is particularly with training. If you have any questions at all, or if you just want to know about what export controls are, like I said, we have a ton of information on our web pages. You can always reach out to our office or me directly. It's entirely up to you. But yeah, if otherwise, I think I'm covered our section. So I'll hand it back to you, Joy.
Okay, well, so first of all, I'd like to actually thank the panelists for presenting the 4 areas. This is going to be complex, as you heard, just by the representation of the offices. You can see what the scope of this is going to be. So our next slides, yeah, what don't we know? This is going to summarize and actually 2 slides on this topic, right? And so feel free also to ask us questions while we're going through this piece. All right. Any one of our experts here for their areas will try to go further with what we know to this point. So exact timeline for implementation. It has been said, coming out of the White House, and the agencies have reiterated this, that it will be 1 year after the final version of when the requirements are issued. So they issued the draft guidance earlier this year. There was a deadline for comments sometime the beginning of May or beginning of June. We've heard last week that was the Federal Demonstration Project National Conference. And at that meeting, NSF, by the way, they drew the straw to actually be the coordinating agency across all federal agencies for this project. So Gene Feldman, and they do have a website now maintained for this purpose. So Gene Feldman was talking about that, they got the comments in, and they are looking forward to synthesizing. They've already been working on synthesizing them, obviously with the what may happen at the end of this weekend with potential shutdown or not, but they will continue to work, and their goal is to actually try to get something issued by the end of this year, which would mean implementation by the end of 2024, maybe early 2025. Okay. Shape of the training. Yes, that may be up to us as an institution, which is what we're sincerely hoping for, rather than specifying that, like, for example, you may not know RCR requires in-person contact for part of the training. So this may be some of the distinctions. So obviously, online would be good. Video, probably some type of mix, and it's going to be driven by different areas with what William has done and set up for export control, with what Kim is doing in her area, and with Mel cybersecurity. So just different shapes. Who has to be trained? Yeah. One of the things that's very clear is all researchers, anybody clearly who's key personnel, or maybe even anybody who is funded off of a grant. They're being very clear on that. There is a possibility of students. They say students in one area, but not others. And how does this figure? Yeah, so this is what it is. They listed each one of these 4 sections, and then had, yes, competing definitions or beneath them. So we're going to have to see all of that. Likely staff. This is a new one, right? That having required staff. Those of you who have taken the COI training know we do extend it to most staff. And I think they're just doing an extension of that. That was a decision we made here locally, but something that nationally they're going to continue doing. And yes, the roller coaster was very deliberate image, by the way, because that's what this is feeling like. And yes, in some cases, our stomachs are dropping over some of this. Coordination. How will we integrate this training into other existing trainings, such as RCR? Right, because a lot of the topics, as Brian went over the topics, a lot of those topics are already covered in RCR, but a chunk of them are not. And RCR is still going to be required for NSF and for certain NIH fellowship grants. So maybe it's something that there's an RCR supplement, RCR research security training supplement. So people have taken the RCR training, then they just have to do a piece on top of that. Some of these things, we're really going to have to use this year to plan some of these things out. Export control already has trainings. And Mel mentioned there's already the cybersecurity training, security awareness, sorry. With all of these, how can we put these pieces together? The COI training will not be consumed under the research security training. That's going to come out of Brian's office. That COI training is very distinct. It's actually driven very specifically by the NIH regulations. And oh, by the way, they say, if you make any substantial changes to the training, then everybody has to be retrained. Yeah. If in case you've taken the training, those of you who've taken it every 4 years, notice maybe there's a new question, but there's no substantial guidance, because there's currently 18,000 individuals who are listed in that training database. And no, we don't want to roll that all out again. So working on all of that. The timing of the training, right? This is where this is the TBD. Most likely by the time of proposal, we're going to have where that is, and definitely by the time of award. That's going to be very clear. Again, the reflection into Ramses. We have some precedent with this again, because guess what? That was a feature of the COI training. That training is reflected. For those of you who remember, if you look in Ramses, you can see who has taken their COI training. This training probably is also at some point going to have to reflect that. At the very least, the research security training that's coming out of Brian's office. But then how are we going to include the other trainings that are going to be required, and where that's going to live in some type of yet to be determined centralized database? An easy reflection for all of you to see, and to then encourage people who are in your area. Because, right, you all know what happens with COI training. The grant cannot be set up to start spending until the training is completed. It's going to be very similar for this. So you're going to want to get people to train, to train. And that's where orientation is going to be key. Yeah, I hear the sighs. Yeah, we've been staring down this train coming down the tracks, the freight train coming down the tracks, literally since January 2022. And initially we literally had just the 4 categories, and then they gave us a little more earlier this year. But yes, and the frequency. We know it's at orientation. They want at least one initial training, at least for one piece of this. They want, yes, annual updates. But is it true that every time, let's say that somebody's going to have to take the travel training, let's say they're going over to Africa, they're going over to Zambia, are they going to have to take that international training if they're going over 3 times within a given year? Or is it going to be sufficient they train once for the year? And if they're going over to Vietnam or wherever they're going in the world, Central America, where that's going to be. Question. Absolutely.
Online, I'll just ask you to repeat it.
Sure.
Which is, how will this training affect consultants and independent contractors?
Yes. So the question is, how will this training affect consultants and independent contractors? That's somebody who deals with having to deal with that with the COI training, by the way, because it is required, also specified by NIH regulations. They haven't said, right? This is one of the unknowns. I can't help but anticipate. I'd be curious to know what the panel thinks, that they're probably not going to exclude consultants and collaborators, at the very least from the basic research security training. Yeah.
If they're named on the project.
The mic, if you can grab the mic.
You can just give pass it the mic, that was like great. Good feedback on that.
I would agree with what Joy said, that, ultimately, if they're named on the project, or they're going to be in the budget justification or the scope of work or in anything, that most likely they're going to need to get at least the basics of what to be aware of.
And depending on what they're doing, they may need to do this. I can imagine the cybersecurity awareness training. Yes, question in the back.
Question, both pertaining to human subjects research.
Mhm.
So I don't see anyone from the Office of Human Research Ethics on the panel. And I have found historically there's been some disconnect between guidance and other things that come out from the IT security privacy office side and the OHRE. So I'd be interested to hear how that office is going to be involved in this. The other piece is storage of PHI. There's a lot of different platforms that people are using to store PHI, including Excel forms. And we've tried for many years to figure out an enterprise-wide solution so that we can benefit from better infrastructure for storing data. And I'm wondering if any of this may propel the OVCR to make some sort of investment in an enterprise-wide solution for us to store our human subject data safely.
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question so people online can hear them. The first was about how this training may coordinate, particularly on the cybersecurity front, with the Office of Human Subjects Research, with the training, because sometimes, yes,
The training, just everything.
everything. So interestingly enough, what we're presenting to you is exactly what has come out from the federal government. They are not making a distinction here for animal training, for human subjects training. They consider it covered under this rubric with that. And so, and obviously most of you are probably taking city training for that. I don't think there's going to be any difference with that, because human studies is its own distinct area with this. And we're looking at this, that the research security training is going to be a foundational training, and then other trainings are going to have to pile on top of that. Again, we're going to try to minimize any overlap, but know that there's still maybe some. And again, because human subjects is under its own very distinct set of federal guidelines, coming from the Office of Research Protections, ORP, at the federal level. Okay. Second question was about the storage of PHI, and will this push toward having an enterprise-wide solution, university-wide solution to storing data with PHI? Catherine Georger, who's the Chief Privacy Officer, if she heard this, she would probably be raising her hands and saying, thank you, because that is obviously where the data breaches, which Mel mentioned, going to the Office of Civil Rights. That's where where frequently breaches can happen, even unintentional breaches. And I can give you a case scenario that I know about several years ago from a individual who went on vacation, took their phone with them the way most of us do, and had been accessing, the way many people do, university email over the phone. The phone was not encrypted. Now, most of her phones are encrypted at this point. The phone was not encrypted. But of course, the university email included PHI because the position was research coordinator. And in the emails, right, you think about what's in your emails, the PHI frequently can fly around in the emails. And so that became a data breach because the phone was lost, and it was on one of the Caribbean islands. So now you add the international flavor. This is what happens. Unintentional behavior. It happens to all of us. The phone was stolen or lost. It disappeared. So this is where trying to build in as much as we can on our devices, but the protection of the PHI has obviously has raised much higher. And I'll say it's raising much higher because the value now, we all know, I think, the value of what PHI is now. Factor in artificial intelligence. This is now all data that will drive AI chat boxes to make the decision. AI thrives on as much data as possible. It's why I was discussing just yesterday with the head of tech transfer. The AI groups are completely against copyright protection or patent protection, intellectual property protection for AI. And it's because they want the data open as much as available to feed their tools. They are literally consuming monsters. They want as much data as possible in order to make their tools smarter, which also can benefit us. But this is where the heightened security concerns there's going to be even more around our health information. So with all of that, I'll do a little kind of plug. Tomorrow, the School of Data Science is actually doing a presentation from 9 till I think 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and the new Innovation Lab up on Rosemary Street. And it is about artificial intelligence and health information. So if you can scope on by, I'm going because I need to learn too. This is a new world for all of us with this. So they have not hit that in the research security program training. I think it's going to be an update because we know, we know AI is coming. It's maybe people are already using it in certain cases, and it's going to be a useful tool for all of us. But then this protection of the research data. And as you all know, the data management system has come into place. The OVC, the Vice Chancellor, Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research, has committed to having the database management system already in place for all data, already research data. But the PHI encrypted is, yes, a whole new level. Great question. Thank you. Sure.
It's about 7 minutes from ending.
It's okay. Yes. All right. Who do I contact to learn about the policy of storing and sharing whole genome sequencing? It can't be de-identified, even though the sample is de-identified, right? Because your DNA is your DNA prior to generating whole genome sequencing, right? Anybody who's watched Finding Your Roots, who do you think I am, where they do it, you know, your fifth cousin once removed is a famous person because the DNA is there, right? Can't really ever be de-identified. Great question. I believe in terms of storing that type of genomic sequencing or that type of genetic data, I'm gonna, Brian or Mel, do you know who would be the best answer? Pick up the mic and answer if you can.
I mean, I honestly don't know. I would recommend Andy Johns as the person to contact for that one, as he would be locked in with anything the OVCR might be doing. And I don't know if you want to talk about Johns, safe computing.
Yeah, research computing has something called the Secure Research Workspace that is probably one of the most secure environments that we have. But we would have to find out if this fits in there and if the use of that data meets kind of the restrictions, if you will, on what's in SRW. Doesn't provide everything. And that's, I think, one of the issues with going with a single solution. It's very difficult because you have so many security controls, for so many different standards and frameworks that we have out there. It would be probably very expensive to try to get something for everything. But yeah, John McGee manages the secure research workspace. Talk to folks interested, or we can pick them up.
The last slide is our contact information. So people can email us and then we can get it to try to get it to the appropriate, the body as needed. So the one thing that we don't have a question on here is, again, you've heard me say the different categories of people that will be done. Out in the hallway earlier, we were talking about what does that N equal number? And I ballparked it for them because I'm already thinking about this. We have 31,000 students on this campus. Even if only half of them have to take this training, we're at 15,000. We have 6,000 plus EHRA faculty and non-faculty. And then we have SHRA employees on top of that. Yeah. So we're easily in the at least probably 20 to 25,000 people range. Overall, again, probably doing the research security training, and then portions of those will take export control. Only portions of those will take the internet, will take the foreign travel. Cybersecurity may come across many of those as well. But this is where the ITS staff will have to take some of this, some specific training, will have to tailor some things. So it's, yeah, it's going to be many different pieces. Obviously, really try to synthesize to minimize the burden. Everyone is very concerned about this nationally. Brian, myself, William, as well as a few other people were on a webinar yesterday, and everyone is very concerned. All the other major research institutions, and particularly the smaller ones, how are they going to tackle this? So again, we wanted to do this as, that's why we called it looking ahead, and to let you know this is coming, not to panic. You're going to start to hear this come up again and again. And obviously we're going to want to get feedback from campus as we go along, because we don't want to put something out that will flop, to be honest with you. And you had a question.
Yeah, so procurement becomes the other area that this ends up inevitably touching. Right? Is
Yes.
that we do work with third-party vendors and their software systems, particularly on research trials for communication and other types of sources. And I guess there's also faculty who still love to use Google Drives instead of using OneNote, right? What guidance would you give to some of us now to start prepping for this inevitability with faculty and staff?
Right. So the question was about how this would interface with procurement, third-party vendors, and particularly with faculty who are, yes, using Google Drives rather than using the OneDrive, which is the secure environment supported by the university. I think you can, there is a policy that you have to use OneDrive, that you cannot use Google. You can grab that policy. You can actually, if you can get that to the business manager of your unit and ask that it be sent out to all faculty as a reminder. You know, that's one thing. This is where getting your university, your unit leadership on board with this, like, hey, listen, you know, this is coming down. We need to make this safe. Can we know, because you know, there are faculty who are doing this. I almost chuckled when I heard Mel talk about sharing your password. I thought about asking how many people know faculty members who've shared their password with their staffs to complete IRB applications, or IPS, or dare I even say COI disclosures. Yeah, that was my favorite one. Yeah. So with that, that's one way, I think, is because this is going to start to be it is already an issue. It's going to start to be heightened, right? I mean, frankly, they've been lucky. They haven't been caught in a breach is what this is what it ultimately, or their data being stolen. Regarding procurement with a third party, that's already built into their process when they're vetting, right? That's what Mel mentioned, that when with Concur, that they vet the vendors beforehand.
Risk assessment.
That is absolutely a piece of it. So this means, though, on some cases, if you start proposing to do a third party vendor who has never been vetted by the university before, and you're sharing maybe PHI or other secure research data, guess what? Allow time for the vetting
Yeah.
process to
Get
occur.
in there early so that we're aware of it,
Yep.
because it takes a while to get some of the vendors to respond.
Yeah.
And if there are already solutions that are available that would work, maybe not the ideal, but it would work, save yourself some time. Try to convince them, this does work. There's no reason to have 10 10 different software packages doing the same thing.
Yep.
From my perspective.
Okay. And do you have we have one more question.
The only other thing I would add is to also start encouraging your staff and your faculty to make relationships with their local IT departments. Those are going to be critical as we move forward into the cybersecurity. So start talking to them now, so if they are thinking about purchasing a third-party vendor, they may know something about that vendor already before it begins to go through the formal list process. Just make those connections. We've seen too many cases where the faculty member files a proposal, knowing that the proposal guidelines had security requirements, and never cleared them through their IT department to make sure that they could actually meet those requirements. So start having those conversations earlier when you see opportunities to have them. Encourage your chair to have ITS come present at a faculty meeting on cybersecurity practices, things of that nature.
And there are particular sponsors for whom this is true, obviously. No great surprise, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of Energy, NASA, Department of Education. Again, education, healthcare targets. And we have another question.
I was just curious, I'm gonna assume the answer is you don't know yet, which is fine, but, in terms of with the sub-recipients, is this something that we would probably do similarly to the COI, where we're trying to verify if they've got an appropriate policy in place first, and then they would have to fall under ours if they don't, or is that something that we would probably, well, I guess with the larger institutions, we would probably have to give them the opportunity to have their.
Right. So the question came up is what would happen with subawards? Would this essentially be flow down or coverage? So just to clarify, remember that the coverage piece is only required for NIH and NSF. It's not required for any other federal agency. The guidance we're talking about is coming from the White House. It is actually going to the agencies. The agencies will then tell us what they want in this area. We don't know. We're hoping they make it a flow down clause, right? And we're hoping they don't make it a flow down clause in the way NIH has done for COI, which is it flows down only if they have a policy that meets the federal regulations. We're hoping it's a straight flow down policy, and then that burden is then on the subs. But then think about what that means for some of your subs. Yeah. And the answer may be, we haven't thought that far ahead yet because we're looking at 25,000. But the answer may be we may need to do something, subaward light, and have something ready to go with that. And I will say the subaward did not even come up under discussion for any of the institutions yesterday, because everyone, and by the way, there were 240 people on that call.
Well, that's what I'm good.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Sure. Bree, I get that. And I love that this is your life and that you're asking that question, because now this will start to go on our radar screen and like, okay, we can't let this drop off the table either, because we'll get caught short. Yeah. Yes, another question.
For Mel, specifically in that early vetting process, about how long is the estimated vetting process? Obviously, it's gonna vary from client to client. and
Yeah.
Contract to contract, but what would you say is a good estimate? Is it?
Oh,
maybe
it-
for like 3 to 6 months?
We try to target a month. But we've also often had problems, the vendor will say, I need a non-disclosure act or agreement. And we go back and forth in council and all that. Some are very easy, frankly. They'll say, we're not going to give that to you because we're not going to make enough money off you. And so they disappear. But we're probably talking, we try our SLA, let's put it that way, is 4 to 5 weeks. Sometimes we do better, sometimes it takes much longer. Sometimes it gets stuck on the requester side as well.
Okay, we're about, yeah, for all of us, right? We're about 5 minutes over at this point, so we're getting the kind of little nudge. But thank you for your attention. We're going to be around for a few minutes if you have questions, and thanks again.